appliances for a super efficient future, we hope. And to have Engineer Felix Uzonya, the Deputy Director of Energy Efficiency of EPRA here in Kenya. So you're very welcome, and we look forward to your welcoming remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, I was standing outside there and looking for Nixon Bukachi, that one there. So I knew my session would start when I see him entering here. So I don't know which room he used to enter, which door he used to enter here. I've seen them now rushing after me. But thank God I'm here, and we're happy to have this session. Maybe, you know, I had another session in the morning there for buildings, and I asked them why people are very serious in this conference. I've seen no one smiling actually up to now. So unlike the other speakers who've been standing here, I will start my opening remarks by giving a story, because stories are some of the best ways of passing information to people. So in the year 2016 or 2017, when the appliance journey started in Kenya, we gathered the regulations in 2016. They started the journey in 2017. My colleague who was going to African Union there, Nixon, I still point at him again. We were with him and we were to start implementing the standards and labeling regulations. We were not part of the team that had developed the standards. That was the problem, number one. So we started the workshops, and this is in the context of what I'm going to talk about in terms of robust policy or robust framework for implementation of S&L. So we started doing workshops. I remember I went to Kisumu. Kisumu is on the western side of Kenya. It's close. They're close to Uganda. We went to Kisumu to do a workshop. We were around EPRA employees. We were around 10. There were some journalists, and we had invited stakeholders to come, mostly the marketers of fridges and air conditioners. So when we reached there, we had only one stakeholder, and we had hired the entire room, only one. And that stakeholder had come from Nairobi. So he had followed us from Nairobi, took a plane to Kisumu. So we had a workshop. I talked nonetheless because you see whether they are there or not, you have to talk. So I told one stakeholder what that we were planning to implement our standards and labeling regulations. So we did the same in Nairobi. No one came. Mombasa, no one came. So we started implementing the regulations. And that's where the trouble started now during implementation. One, why is because of the fees. The registration fee for air conditioner was $5,000. One model, $5,000. For fridges, it was $250. No, for lighting, I think it was $10,000 for one model. For air conditioners was $250. Was $2,500. That's registration. That's problem number one. You got it there. Number two, there were now the standard problems that you are having. Our standards were not implementable. They were not practical. Actually, in the real sense of an engineer. So only standards that were applicable were for refrigerators. But remember, there's the economic problem to it. So we can't implement it because the fee is too high. It doesn't make economic sense. But you see, this is the law. And you see, for us in the government, we say the law has said you do it. So please do it. So we called for a workshop to solve those issues. And now the room was full with stakeholders. They were shouting from every corner, shouting the way government does not consult them and everything. But I told them, now you see that's the importance of consultation. Now that brings to the point of what we call negotiated compliance. So I told them, now you see we're importing appliances. You guys, the fee is too high, and I agree. Actually, they were asking me, what justification did you have to charge $5,000 per model? My boss tried to explain, my then boss. I told her, please don't explain. Tell them you also don't know. Because we just implemented it the way it is, because you guys were not anywhere when you were doing the implementation. So the journey started, then we now had to go back to redo the standards, CLASP is here. I'm sure CLASP will be part of the panelists here. We redid the standards. Now, the private sector, and the private sector specifically, people who work in the appliance industry now became interested in what we are doing. They came to the committees. They wrote a memorandum, of which they didn't write actually. I told them write a memorandum on what is the problem with our program. They didn't write. None wanted to, we say, to bail the cat. So I wrote for them, I gave them, and they sent back to us what was wrong with the, because I had understood their problem, but they didn't want to put it in writing. So I had to write for them. I sent to them privately, and then they sent back to us. Then we started working on it. Then standards and labeling program now came into being. It started, it worked well. Now I have 10 minutes to talk here, so I've spent 4 minutes or 5 there with my story. But what I want to actually point out as I'm giving these opening remarks is on the importance of having the entire value chain when you're talking about efficiency of appliances. That, you know, the speakers, yesterday's speakers were most talking about involvement of public sector, And maybe I would understand because most of the time, the global north, when you talk of standards, it's mostly a private sector affair, even including Australia, I think New Zealand. So, but then when you come to the global south, when it comes of developing standards to improve efficiency, it becomes a government affair. So you might find, my colleague wrote an email yesterday because we have a workshop on Friday to stakeholders to come for a workshop to discuss standards. One stakeholder asked the government to pay for him flight ticket from Mombasa to come to Nairobi for that. You know, and those standards are affecting him, not us. So you see, that's the thing is that we need now to start thinking along ways of trying to inculcate the principle, the philosophy that standards should be spearheaded on a multi-pronged approach. First, of course, from the private sector. They are the ones who work with the fridges. They are the ones who know that an air conditioner cannot work under T3 conditions, can work under T1 condition. Someone sitting in government office, even if he's an engineer, does not understand clearly. So we need to have that kind of fuse between that, and I think that might be discussed. I'm not sure. I've not seen the questions. Then we're talking about issues of course, problems with our laboratories. We sure we don't have regional laboratories to test everything in Africa. And our CSS and our PS are talking about financing, of course, because this is a specific forum. Where do we want our finance to go in a super efficient future? Do you want to build labs? That would be the question. Do you want to build capacity? I want to thank GIZ. I don't know if they're here. There's a day we looked for someone to train us on maps for 4 good years. I think we found one. GIZ got one for us. It's from Peru. So we are going to undergoing a series of training on how to develop maps, because that's where now we need to go to do the funding. If you are funding, are we funding to build capacity? Capacity to test, to do the conformity tests, because we cannot do them in the global south. Maybe countries like Ghana could be having some of the test laboratories, especially for cooling appliances, but in East Africa region, we may not be having that. I understand some countries don't also have, even New Zealand doesn't have a lab to test. But then do we need that to improve our cooling efficiencies? If we are calling for the issue of finances, are we calling for finances in terms of data? Because, you know, we started this process in 2016, like in Kenya. Ghana started a bit early. South Africa has it. The process, I think it's in Tunisia and all that. But then what have we saved? That's the question. And what we have saved, is it verifiable? That's another question in data. So are we doing finance in terms of improving the data management? Because as I was telling the other group in the building section is that you cannot manipulate what you cannot measure. So we need data, and the data is supposed to be robust. And if we need this data, of course, we need the mechanism for collecting the data itself. We need the models to be working along the data and all this. And then at long last, we need regional support, regional integration. And this will be my last point, because not because my points are over, but because the time will be over. So we talk of regional integration because like a country like Kenya has been doing very good in refrigeration and air conditioning. We are at around 99%, I think. Yes, it's quite good, by the way. But then you might find these appliances that are not efficient in the country. because they have crossed the border from these porous border points and they come in. So what we also would be thinking about is about regional integration or harmonization of standards. But of course, with the understanding that these standards could be different. If I harmonize a standard from Tunisia to Tunis to Cape Town, could have a problem because testing could be the same, but then maps could be different because these things are working under different also environment. We don't, the global south does not enjoy we say in Europe they live along the very small latitude. It's more or less the same latitude. But then you come to Africa and you start traveling from all the way, you cross 3 tropics or something. Capricorn, Cancer, Equator before the other side. So you find things are changing alongside and all those. So these are the kind of stuff, of course, we need to really think about. And as CPRA, because I'm standing as CPRA, the regulator, we are saying that even as we do the regional integration, the concept of stakeholder engagement is important. This is from anecdotal evidence. We've seen it before, that you don't involve the stakeholders, you'll be in trouble. So stakeholder involvement is quite important, and number one stakeholder, according to me, are these people who import and who distribute those appliances. With those few remarks, I say thank you very much. If you had waited for me for 2 minutes, I was standing outside there. I also say I'm very sorry for that. But after this, we'll meet outside, then we greet each other. I think then that will be over. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much for that very apt opening. We're going to be talking about international collaboration. We're going to be talking about challenging levels of regulation and how we implement them. And I think your story was a perfect cameo for what we need to talk about later. I'd just like to ask the panel if they would join me on the stage, please. So we have Li Peng Chung, we have Luke Trussell from AFDB, Han Wei, Stephen Cummins, and Noah Horowitz. And you can come up the stairs or straight over the top, whichever suits you best. Thank you. So I have the chair's prerogative of showing a few slides just before we start. This is just to set the scene for the session. Now, we're running a bit late, so I won't show all of them, but I just wanted to start with the context. So this whole conference has been built around the point that countries have got together to agree that they want to double the rate of improvement of energy efficiency. But how do we do that? So we have the agreement in place. It was a huge amount of work last year. It is to be celebrated, but now we have to get on and do it. And that's not so straightforward. And of course, in the whole energy context of energy efficiency, appliances present a great opportunity in the near term because their refresh cycle is much quicker than many other things. It's quicker than industrial processes or buildings. So they do give us a real opportunity to make a difference between now and 2030. But the good news is, and this is that we want to make sure everybody understands and kind of believes this, is that the level of performance that we need to achieve that doubling overall is out there. So this comes from the IEA Energy Efficiency Market Report last year, a combination of that and our net zero emissions analysis. And basically what we're seeing here is the green horizontal line on here is what we need to achieve our net zero targets, our ambitions. It's what we need to achieve by 2030 to achieve the overall 2050 outcomes, if that makes sense. But what we wanted to show here is that, and really it's only the lighting and air conditioners on the one side of this, but we look at the range of products that are out there that are being sold typically in a large range of countries, developed and developing, and we basically see that in most cases, even the kind of average level at least meets or can exceed what we need for net zero. And in all cases, the typically best available class, the product in class, is already in the shops. So, you know, this should be comforting to us. It's a good start. But then we start to talk to governments about, okay, well, why won't you make more stringent regulation in order to achieve these results, achieve these outcomes that have been signed up to? And the first thing is how. So this is, to apply the standards of labelling people, this is a bit simplistic probably, but it's a really, really useful summary just to say what the basic tools are and how they work together. So we have our regulation, which in the case of appliances, in most simple terms, is our minimum energy performance standards. We have our information, which is generally our labels, and we have incentives, which can be kind of rebates, grants, preferential tax treatments, and that sort of thing. But what we think is really important is that these actually all work together. They're on the same scale. I mean, some people on the stage who, like me, have been doing this for a while, will remember the days when you had a MEPS that was completely divorced from a label. They weren't even on the same scale. Sometimes they weren't even tested the same way. Fortunately, that's rare, but when people are starting programs, it's really important to think of this as a set of products that works together in a package. And we like to think of it as a ladder. So your MEPS is the bottom of the ladder, your labels take you up the rungs of the ladder, and then your incentives should be applied to, bring forward those more efficient appliances. So when we talk to governments about this and say, okay, here's your policy package, they say, yes, but it's going to make things too expensive. We're not going to be able to afford them. We want our citizens to have access to the services these things bring, so we can't do it. So we decided that we kind of got a bit fed up with listening to this story again and again. We'd start going and looking for some new data. We tried a few techniques, and we settled in this case for using a crowdsourcing process. So this is basically data which is collected from shops, from retail outlets in these three regions. People with smartphones go and take pictures and scan products, and we file all that. We have a questionnaire. We bring all that data together, we clean it up, and we take a look at it. And I think what's interesting about this is, if we take Southeast Asia here, which is the region where the international collaboration, the harmonisation story has been going longest, probably. It's a highly competitive market. It's a very, very big market. You can see here, the red lines, horizontal lines, are one of the most important points of this chart. You can spend, say, I don't know, $250 on an air conditioner that has an efficiency of 3 watts per watt, and you can spend that on one that has efficiency of 6 watts per watt. There is no evidence here of a relationship between price and efficiency, none at all. Size often makes a difference, brand makes a difference, there are more features perhaps available, but the basic cost and efficiency relationship that people always cite there's not evidence for that. Also, Southeast Asia been at it longer. You can see there's a vast range of products available, so choice hasn't been restricted by regulation. And the range of prices has shrunk. This is a much more constrained set of data. You go to Latin America, where it's not such a big market yet. It's growing, but it's not had the same level of activity in terms of collaboration regionally. And whilst you can still buy, a highly efficient product for the same price as a very inefficient product, the range of prices is high. It's just a much more scattered picture. And I think that we come back to this in a couple of years' time, we'll start to see a convergence towards what's happened in Southeast Asia. So we then move to sub-Saharan Africa, and this is a very immature market, of course, for air conditioners. So we have many, many less products or models on the market. We still have, the ability to pay a lot for a highly inefficient product and not so much for a very medium efficiency product. but you just don't have the same range. And I expect that, we'll see that converge towards the Latin America and then eventually Southeast Asia. So I just wanted to start this by saying, the premise that it costs too much to have higher regulations, higher MEPS requirements, doesn't seem to be borne out by the evidence. And I think that's the framing I'd like to leave with for the rest of this conversation. Thank you. So, we're going to go into our questions for the panel now. And having made my pitch for why this shouldn't be a problem, I'd kind of like to ask each of the panelists to start with, because everybody here has had a lot of experience of these sorts of activities. If we need to double in this decade, what do you think the two biggest priorities are? And what steps are you in your organisation taking to try and meet those priorities? And I'd like to start with Peng Chung, if I may.
Thank you. I will try. It works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, the energy efficiency is a quite important issue in China. So we think the standard and the labeling program may be the most powerful tools to improve the energy efficiency, especially in the equipment and the appliances. So now our priority work is about make the standard higher and broader. So we have to improve our standard to as much higher as possible, and also we hope to broaden the scope of the product covered by the standard, because a lot of new products. For example, the charging equipment for electric vehicles. Now we are going to set a new standard for this kind of a new product. So to be simplified, make the standard higher and broader is our priority since now. Thank you.
Peng Chung, what's been the biggest problem for rolling out more ambitious standards in your experience in China?
Yes, I think it's a common question, and also the answers may be similar. The resources, we need a lot of investment on the standard and labeling program. How to get enough resources from governments and from the public budget is a problem. Another challenge is I think we need the revolution of our standard. We call it next generation of the standard. It should be more be smarter, be faster, and we call it greener. So we should consider not only energy efficiency, we should consider carbon, we should consider the resources or something like this. So this kind of new things need a next generation standard. Maybe we can talk later why we need this kind of smart things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So Stephen, what are the priorities for the UK in terms of raising ambition for product policy?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today, and thank you to our hosts in the Kenyan government for hosting us as well. So I lead a team in the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, which is totally devoted to this issue. How can we deliver more efficient energy-related products? So I think the UK has a pretty, for just a little bit of context at the beginning, so the UK has an ambition to reduce energy consumption from buildings and industry by 15% by 2030, and appliances are an absolutely crucial part of this. So we estimate that energy-using products account for about 55% of the UK's non-transport emissions. So MEPs in particular are a cost-effective way of saving energy. Just to address the question, in terms of the two priorities, I think the first one for us would be regulation, using the levers that we have in governments to raise eco-design standards, and backed by effective market surveillance and enforcement, which is absolutely crucial, I think, to success in this agenda. I think this also includes the UK's ability, post-Brexit, if I can dare to say the word, to diverge if necessary from EU product standards, but only where there is a good case for doing so. I think the second area is around incentives. And I think there's probably two aspects to this. I think the first is around labelling. So energy labelling for consumers is particularly important. We've already done a lot in this space. We've made improvements to energy labels by simplifying the way energy efficiency is displayed on a new scale from A to G. The new levels raise the bars for each class, meaning that now very few products will actually be considered to be A-rated. So this incentivizes the market to produce more energy efficient products to reach the highest categories. But we're also looking at how we can incentivize for manufacturers and for purchasers. So one example of that is the UK's Energy Technology List website. And this promotes the top 25% most energy efficient products in the market in their particular class. So this incentivizes both manufacturers and purchasers. And the UK government's own public procurement standards are very much based on the Energy Technology List.
Thank you. So really, two really important points, leading on from the MEPs and the smart future regulations that Peng Chung mentioned. Compliance, you talked about market surveillance, really important. And we don't talk enough in these fora about incentives, but I think we need to share a bit more information collectively about how incentives work and what the options are, because we need them, and we kind of, I don't know, I don't think that conversation is active enough. So thanks for raising those. Luke, from AFDB's perspective, what do you think the priorities are when we're talking about doubling the energy efficiency of the economy, but appliances in particular?
Thank you very much, Mel, for inviting us to join this panel. So just want to start with the report on energy efficiency that was released last year jointly by the IEA and the African Development Bank. And that says that that project the demand for electricity for a household to double by 2030 because of the increased use of appliances. Climate change and also urbanization is driving up the demand for electricity in a household. So for us at the African Development Bank, working on the appliances to ensure that we optimize the use of energy consumption in the residential sector and also in the other sectors of the economy is very, very important. Now, having said that, just to answer your question, I would like to touch on three points. The first point, when we're talking about the adoption of minimum energy performance standard, I think the first, from my perspective, the first priority is the need for developing capacity in terms of enforcing those MEPs. Because if you look at the regulatory indicator for sustainable energy that the World Bank published, I think, every year or 2 years, you will see that in terms of the adoption of MEPs, most countries in Africa here, it's easy to adopt MEPs. It's easy to adopt them. It doesn't cost a lot of money because you have already works that have been done, like what the UNEP has done, the regulatory standards that the UNEP have. So it's not easy to build on the international best practices to adopt these MEPs. But the problem, when you look at the enforcement, that's where the problem is. There is no enforcement. There is a need to build capacity in terms of testing those equipment, test conformity, and also having a very strong market surveillance mechanism. So that's what I will call what I identify as the first priority. The second one is related to infrastructures in terms of waste treatment and management, waste resulting from those high energy efficient equipment. In most countries, you don't have the facility to treat or to manage these equipment once they are at the end of their life. And what it's doing is you can have a project that is ready to be implemented, an investment project that is ready to be implemented here, but because there is no strong, let's say, waste management strategy, because there is nothing in the country, no facility, no infrastructure, so there is no strong waste management strategy to implement the project, then it means that with that program you cannot get that program cannot meet the environmental and social safeguard to get the, let's say, an environmental certificate for its implementation. So I think it is a very important point that, that I had also identified as a priority. The third and last point that I would like to point out is the need to invest, to design investment project for targeting energy efficient appliances. It's good we can adopt maps, we will say we implement, but we need those investment projects to support the implementation of those of the maps. And there are a lot of successful innovative business models that can be used to implement, to develop and implement this energy efficient investment program targeting energy efficient appliances. So it's very important. And in terms of the steps, what we are doing at the African Development Bank to support the countries is we are running currently a program that is the Energy Efficiency Market Development Program that is funded by the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa. And with that program, we can easily mobilize grant resources to support countries when they want, for example, to develop, to prepare a project, to conduct feasibility studies for, let's say, investment program targeting energy or high energy efficient appliances. So it's something that is and that we are already using to support the countries. We've already supported a couple of countries in Africa here to design on-bill financing programs targeting energy efficient appliances. And it can also be like other instruments, like it can be a result-based financing programs or any other program. So it's what we have been doing with countries in terms of providing technical assistance to design and prepare these sort of projects, investment projects. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've seen some really successful examples of investment projects that are aimed at improving the or encouraging market transformation, to improving the availability of higher performing products. But we don't very often see projects that finance the public sector, that help the public sector put in place the infrastructure that they need to actually manage an appliance policy program. You see a grant to do standards for air conditioners, or a grant to do something with lighting. But what most governments need is help to put the whole infrastructure in place for a standards and labelling program or appliance policy program. Do you do any of that sort of thing, or do you have any ideas about people who are funding those types of projects? The policy support? Yeah? For Luke.
Do you want to go, or shall I? Yeah.
So if I understand, if you're talking about a grant for investment project led by government, right?
It's not investing in the products, it's investing in the infrastructure that the government needs. So the government needs staff, the government needs a registration system and a whole set of infrastructure to build appliance programs.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is missing.
Yeah,
the
so
support for that.
Exactly. So the approach that we use is when there is an investment program like that we implement in, an investment program targeting high energy efficient appliances, I mean, the program is not just about making these high energy efficient appliances available, but we have also other components that will, let's say, address the need for this sort of infrastructures for, let's say, capacity building, for institutional capacity building. So that's why when we have this sort of investment program, we integrate a component that will help install maybe let's say a test facility. It can be a test facility, or now what we are seeing and trying to do is to have in this sort of programs also maybe components that will address the need for having a waste treatment facility. So it's important to take advantage of this program to integrate this sort of components to also try to address all the problem that you have in the ecosystem that you need to support actually the dissemination of the high energy efficient appliances.
Yeah, I'll come in briefly on that question as well. So, my mic, back again. Yeah, I think there's probably three things that we do in terms of financial support from government. I mean, I've mentioned one of them already. I mean, the energy technology list, the website that that's something that we fund. So, and it's I think it's probably it's in the top 75 of the most accessed government websites or information sources. So that is a financial contribution. I think the second area is around research. So in terms of informing where we go next on particular product standards, we fund research in order to kind of have that informed position around the level that we should be setting MEPs, what the impact's likely to be on the market, and whether or not it's going to actually achieve the wider benefits of the regulation. And I think the third one, and I've touched on this already, is that kind of market surveillance function. So, you know, we fund the Office for Product Safety and Standards to provide that surveillance of the market, but they also test products as well. And actually they are an enforcement tool, but I think they're also a critical friend, if I could say that, of manufacturers. So, you know, they will do the testing, they will work with the manufacturers, they will help them to bring products to the market and to test them for their effectiveness and compatibility with standards. So I think those are probably three examples.
Great, thank you. Noah, what are your priorities in this space these days?
Sure. Am I live here? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, welcome everybody. I'm Noah Horowitz. I lead a philanthropic program on clean cooling, and I want to give a shout out to IEA. These have been 2 amazing days, and I want to thank everybody for how welcoming you've been. This is my first time in Africa. Unfortunately, I haven't left the grounds here, but I plan to. So bring all your best ideas to me. I have 47 more hours and counting. Okay, so the priority of the program that I lead is to make sure cooling is energy efficient, climate friendly, and that everyone has access to the cooling they need. So we're talking about space cooling, refrigeration, and the refrigerants inside, which have hydrofluorocarbons, which are a very strong greenhouse gas. So I'm going to make this a little interactive. If everybody can stand up and either have a pen or a computer nearby. I'll do this very quick, Mel, don't worry. Everybody up, it's the end of 2 days. I'm going to give you 3 numbers, and you either need to write this down or commit it to memory. 3 billion, more than 1 billion, and 100 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions. What those numbers correspond to, there are going to be more than 3 billion more air conditioners installed around the world between now and the next few decades. See those white boxes all around the room? Those are mini split air conditioners. Those are going to become more and more prevalent, in particular in the global south, in countries where it's very hot and humid. Unfortunately, over 1 billion people are going to lack the access they need to clean cooling, or any cooling at all. So we need to, while we're working on MEPs, think about the people side as well. But if we get cooling right, we can avoid 100 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions. That's more than 2 years' worth of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So that's our challenge and opportunity just looking at cooling, but many of the same principles apply. So Mel, I'll actually answer your question now. Everybody can sit down unless you enjoy standing. Thank you for indulging me. And remember those numbers. There are lots of important numbers that have been shared in this conference. So the first priority, not a surprise, is we need minimum energy performance standards for the cooling equipment. Some countries don't have them, or they might have them for refrigerators, but they don't have them for air conditioners, or the cooler that stores cold beer and water in a small shop. Those commercial refrigerators also, we need to make sure they're not being wasteful. We need to act now. We can't wait, because each year we install this new equipment, we're locking ourselves into 10 to 15 years worth of energy waste with all the negative outcomes that come from that. Also, we need to be smart, and it's not easy. How do we make sure people have access to the cooling they need, especially the most vulnerable? And lastly, I just want to mention something that hasn't come up, and that's there was the Global Cooling Pledge that was announced at the last COP. It had a whole list of wonderful things, some of them very ambitious. How do we act as an international community to move the agenda there to make sure that's just not a pretty piece of paper that was put together? So those are the main things I wanted to start with. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And thank you for bringing us to cooling, which is, of course, an extremely important subject here. And just a reminder that, you know, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And we need to make sure, as Noah says, people have access to the cooling that they need. Hanwei, what would your priorities be in the context of doubling the rate of improvement of energy efficiency when we're talking about appliances? Where would you head first?
Thanks, Mel, for the question, and thank you for inviting me from Energy Foundation China to join this event. It's a great time to be with all of you, share the experience and insights on this. Since I stay with Energy Foundation China, and we work a lot on improving energy efficiency and promoting the renewable energy since the very beginning of establishment of Energy Foundation in China. So we are very dedicated to the mission of sustainable energy development and eco-prosperity in China and the world, and by promoting the renewable and energy efficiency. So talking about the two priorities, I think by drawing our experience the past in China, our work, that we very dedicated to improve the ambition of energy efficiency standard in China and globally. I think that's the very high priority goal for our work. And since we believe the energy efficiency standard and labeling program will be the very effective policy tool to reduce the carbon emission and also save energy. And also beyond that, we also believe the standard will be very important to accelerate the technology innovation and also accelerate the market transformation of all this clean new technology. So that's why we insist on working on this. And the second second priority I would like to mention is the regional harmonization. Actually, Mel already mentioned during the scene setting. I think we are very keen to promote the regional harmonization, the regional standard harmonization. I just want to give my experience that early this year I had a mission to Cambodia to promote and support them for the cooling action plan. We support SCAP to work with them to launch the National Cooling Action Plan. I just got a chance to visit a local store there for the appliances. Yeah, I was very surprised. I saw each air conditioners, they have one label, different from different countries. The Thailand label, Chinese label, Malaysia label. Yeah, it's very difficult and confusing for consumers to make their purchase decision. It's difficult to benchmark in the efficiency and performance of the products. So I think that's make the country very difficult to reduce the carbon, to realize their high quality products, the market transformation. So I think the regional standard harmonization would be really crucial, but we do need to work together for this process to facilitate the multilateral process, to building the consensus, and to supporting the policy coordination among the region, the countries, and all the key stakeholders. So that's the two things ambition and the regional collaboration.
I think everybody would agree with those. They've come out in everybody's remarks so far. And in terms of, have you got any thoughts in terms of ambition? You know, what are the problems governments face in your experience when we're asking them to be more ambitious? Why can't they do it? Well, that's to Han Wei actually, but yeah. Why do you think governments can't be more ambitious or won't be more ambitious?
Yeah, I think the market development and market advancement and technology advancement actually goes very fast, even faster than our imagination and prediction, actually. And we can definitely, when we improve the efficiency and the ambition, we need to balance the cost and also the technology advancement. But we do think sometimes we keep conservative, but I think the market can go faster, and also the technology can go faster. And I would like to take example, the Chinese air conditioner maps, for example. And in 2020, we just launched the new maps with support from NOAA, the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, and we upgrade the Chinese air conditioner maps that year. And at that time, we really struggling the fixed speed AC and the variable speed AC, and also the how to remove the market transformation toward more efficient, frequent speed AC. Finally, we decided by working with our colleague from Seniors, so we combine these two standards into one and try to benchmark in the efficiency for the variable speed AC and fixed speed AC. And that's a very challenging for Chinese industry of ACs, right? And a lot of investment involved. But we do see there's really a fast development by driving the maps, the new maps. And within the 1 year implementation, the fixed speed AC, the market share of fixed speed is less than 2%. So that's what I want to see, really to call for this ambition, and the market and technology can go much faster than our imagination. Yeah.
No, you'd love to see no fixed speed split system air conditioners available anymore. I mean, what do you think? What have you learned over the last 20 years that tells you how we should approach that? How are we going to get rid of the least efficient products in this context?
I think we need to do two things at the same time, and it's challenging. One is let's get the inefficient products off the market through MEPs, while at the same time, what's the next generation of super efficient products? And we need to invest in them and make sure those can be brought to the market. We need the equivalent of the electric vehicle for air conditioners. And the good news is we're on path to bring something that's dramatically more efficient, and there was a prize called the Global Cooling Prize that was based in India that showed what was possible. Now we need to figure out how to support commercialization of that. And I think there are many other pieces. If I can quickly go over cooling, we need to build our buildings right. We need to avoid or reduce the need for mechanical cooling. So that's through various passive cooling techniques and very reflective light-colored roofs, reduce the amount of heat that the building absorbs. That's a low-cost technology that we should be getting as many roofs with those coatings as possible. So there'll still be the need for mechanical cooling in many places. So we need to make sure those are as good as possible. We need to complete this journey from fixed speed to inverters the way China has already for their domestic market. Those are the room ACs or mini splits. That results in about a 30% reduction in energy use. And this is particularly important besides the greenhouse gas mitigation, these air conditioners are going to overstress the grids and cause power outages. And that's particularly harmful to people during these extended heat waves. So I mentioned we need to get these next generation products there as well. There's, ceiling fans are very common in some households. That might be the only cooling equipment they have, and that might be sufficient. They're fans that use half the power of one today, delivering the same level of comfort. Here's a little acronym, if you still have your pen from before, BLDC, brushless direct current motors. Those are available on the market, but they have very little market share. And the Indian government is working with various partners to get 10 million of those into the field quickly, and hopefully that will jumpstart that market. A couple of other things, the refrigerants inside your household refrigerator, large-scale refrigeration, all this cooling equipment, they have refrigerants inside them, and they unfortunately today have hydrofluorocarbons, which can be up to 1,000 times more potent than CO2. They leak slowly during use, or if you split a tube, or at the end of the life. They tend to get crushed and released into the environment. There's a whole treaty, the Montreal Protocol, that's trying to address that and phase that down, but we need to shift to these low and ultra-low global warming potential refrigerants as soon as we can. And then something we haven't discussed, a lot of food is lost around the world due to the lack of refrigeration. The term is the cold chain. The farmer harvests the food. Between when it's harvested to getting to the market, there's no refrigeration or inadequate refrigeration. There are lots of technical solutions available. We don't need a better silver box with a solar panel and battery on top. The farmers don't have a way to access that. So this is where creative financing can come and help. So again, in closing, we need to work in both ends. Let's raise the floor, and let's not lock in those inefficient products, and let's at the same time work for the much better equipment. And there's so many benefits, and depending who you talk to, you may put something at the top of the list or bottom. Many of the people that fund the work we are able to fund, greenhouse gas mitigation is number one, so we need to talk tons, and there's lots of tons that will come. But we're also preventing power outages. And we could also make it faster and cheaper to convert to a clean, renewable grid. So what happens when everybody turns on that air conditioner at 6 p.m. and the sun's not shining? Do you run a dirty peaker plant, or do you invest in a lot of storage? We think this is a more efficient and better for the environment to go for efficiency. And also the fossil plants that are still out there, and they will be there for a while, those put out a lot of pollutants that cause public health problems. We'll have improved air quality. And bottom line, we're going to be helping people with lower utility bills. So there's so many benefits, and we need to find out how to get these policies across the finish line.
Thanks, Noah, and I'm going to come back to that at the end. But Luke, AFDB has been doing work on super ESCOs in particular, but public procurement of efficient products. Would you just like to say a little bit more about how, just in a minute or two because we're running out of time, about how that links into our ladder of MEPS labels and high-performing products? How are you going to use the super ESCOs to help us with the market transformation we need?
Yeah. So we take into account the fact that on the continent, when you look at the energy efficiency market, it's still at a very early stage in these countries, and in this context, I think governments.
Sorry.
And I think in this context, government has, let's say, to lead by example by investing in energy efficiency projects in especially public buildings, office building, hospitals, schools, and public lighting, and so on. So, and we believe that publicly backed super ESCO can be a very powerful tool for government to achieve the goal if they want to increase or to develop a sustainable energy efficiency market. So that's why the African Development Bank is spearheading some initiatives related to the super ESCO. So the bank is providing technical assistance to Morocco, for example, to establish and operationalize a super ESCO through with the what is called Société d'Ingénierie Énergétique in Morocco. We have the same TA initiative in Kenya here with KPLC to support the establishment and operationalization of super ESCOs, a super ESCO with KPLC. So the TA is ongoing. The process is ongoing. We are at the beginning, but we are at the level of recruiting an international technical assistance firm that will accompany KPLC in establishing that super ESCO. So, and also given the growing interest of countries, other African countries have, let's say, expressed their interest of developing the super ESCO model in their space to also to create a sustainable energy efficiency market. The bank approved what we call the Africa Super ESCO Acceleration Program last year, which will provide technical assistance to up to 3 countries in Africa to establish and operationalize a super ESCO. So we have started now with Senegal. Now, coming now to your question, how is it going to help in terms of let's say, creating a market for these for high energy efficient appliances? I mean, we think that it's possible to learn from successful lessons elsewhere. For example, in India, where you have a super ESCO ESL that have used, for example, the bulk procurement mechanism to drive down the cost of energy efficient appliances. They've done that with, I think, LED light bulbs. They're doing that with air conditioners now, and they're doing that even with solar irrigation pumps. So what has been successful, that the lesson learned there can be used. We hope that the super ESCO, once it becomes operational in Kenya, for example, here, it will play a leading role. Building on the lesson learned from the successful experiences elsewhere in the world. So building on these lessons will lead the development and let's say, creation of the market for these high energy efficient appliances. It is something which is possible. It has worked somewhere. I think if you adapt it very well to this context, it's something which will also work here. And I think KPLC is also considering that aspect once the super ESCO becomes operational.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Stephen, the UK has been a great supporter of the Super Efficient Appliance Deployment Initiative over recent years in particular, particularly leading up to COP26, where we first started using the doubling the words. We were talking then about the doubling of the efficiency of 4 particular families of appliance. But why does the UK support the SEED initiative? What do you think it's useful for?
Well, I mean, we're really proud to be such a leading supporter of SEED. I mean, it's it's a really important agenda for us. We've been one of the leading funders of SEED, and it has, I think, a really unique convening power. And you can see that with the success of the call to action and the level of reach across every continent that call to action has commanded. So I think that's really important. I mean, I think just more broadly in terms of the value of that type of international cooperation, I think I probably just want to say a couple of things. I mean, I think as we've heard today and over the course of the last couple of days, it's clear that energy efficiency, it is a shared goal, and we can see that international cooperation can strengthen the design and implementation of energy efficiency policy. So the call to action is a very good example of that. It's welcomed. It represents that coordinated effort to double double efficiency globally and to raise those standards. And I think it's generated a sense of momentum in the international space. So, you know, we can see that through the commitments that have been made subsequently at COP28 through the Global Renewable Energy Efficiency Pledge. So collaboration is really important then for raising standards, and I think this helps to drive demand in the market for more energy efficient products. So harmonisation, which we've touched on, you know, it also helps to remove barriers to trade as well, and it also can help to mitigate the risk of dumping of less efficient products in certain parts of the world which may not have higher standards. So I think that's really important in terms of raising the kind of floor. So I think, we welcome the seed work. I think it's really helpful that, you know, the joint statement has focused in on those 4 key energy using products, lighting, residential cooling, residential refrigeration and industrial electric motor systems. And I think as well that seed are doing work not just within their own membership, but with other countries who are non-members as well. So I think a really powerful example of that is the Latin American pathway. So here, you know, you have seed working really closely with countries such as Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico and Panama to again harmonise at a regional level product standards and labelling and lift the overall efficiency of products. So I think just a final point would be, you know, the UK will continue to be, I think, an enthusiastic supporter of seed, and we're very much hoping that seed will continue to be that key platform for global and regional exchanges and policy making for product energy efficiency, continuing to enable governments to share ideas and collaborate to transform the marketplace for these products.
Thank you. And I'd like then to go, and this will have to be the last comment because I don't want to steal too much time from Ari. Just from the person in charge of the most comprehensive appliance policy programme in the world. No pressure. Do you because the China programme is so strong, it's been going for 30 years. You've got all the testing facilities you need, you've got the compliance mechanisms you need. Do you see any benefits to China in international collaboration?
Yes, definitely. We think this very meaningful things. For example, early this morning we heard from our colleagues. They found we found some standard improved in other countries. The inefficient product will flow to the low efficient countries, no standard countries. So we think such kind of collaboration to harmonize the standard globally is very important, not only for the efficiency, also for the industry. They have very clear signal to produce new products and to produce high efficiency products. So it's very good things. And another thing is now we are also think the global collaboration on the new testing procedures for next generation product like smart product. They have a lot of smart functions, but now the testing procedure cannot reflect this kind of energy saving technology, energy saving function. So we need a lot of innovative testing procedures work together to reflect this kind of new the opportunity of energy savings. So I think only one country we have very limited resources, but if we can work together, so we can the better utilize our resources for such kind of new standard. I think it's quite good things for all the countries, for industries, for consumers. So we welcome this idea of collaborations on energy efficiency standard and the labeling program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the answers. I'd just like to sort of, at the end of this, say, I showed some of what I refer to as our myth-busting data earlier, working very closely with our friends and colleagues at CLASP on trying to work out what analysis we can produce collectively that will help governments understand that they can do this. So I had slides I haven't been able to show where you can see that even in very, very poor households, the benefit of highly efficient appliances, well, it's actually more. It's a greater benefit to them than it is to others. So we clearly, in that case, we need ways of getting those efficient appliances into those poorer households. We have issues in this part of the world with second-hand markets, and when we do the comparison, which we've just been doing, of the cost of running a very inefficient second-hand product versus the total life cycle cost of running that compared with a more efficient product, everybody benefits. So it's not cheaper to buy that second-hand product. It's only cheaper in the long term. So I think we need to work together to collect analysis that shows governments that they can and should be more ambitious, because it will be of benefit to all, but then work with people like Luke and others to find ways of getting past that first price point issue. Even if the more efficient product isn't more expensive, there is still an issue with buying a new product versus a second-hand product, for example. So we're going to carry on working at that sort of data collection and analysis. And if anybody in the room or on the stage sees a particular point that they think needs an analytical approach to help governments, then we're all very interested in hearing from you, and we'll do our very best to pull that analysis together. So thank you, everybody, and I'll hand over to Ari now. Thank you. Thank you.
nonprofit, and we were given the opportunity by IEA to lead this second portion of the appliances event. So thank you very much to Mel and her team. Let's see here. Okay. I'm going to share a little bit of data with you to kind of get things started, and then I'll invite the panelists up. So CLASP conducted a major piece of analysis in 2023, just last year, looking at the importance of appliances to climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and resilience. When we combined the emissions from energy use in homes, in commercial buildings, and industrial electric motors, as well as biomass cooking and heating, we discovered that these end uses together account for 39% of global energy-related CO2 emissions. Clearly, appliances have a major impact on our climate. We looked at IEA's net zero by 2050 scenario and determined what portion of the energy produced each year would be available for appliances, essentially an appliance energy budget. We assumed that any additional energy demanded by appliances over and above this amount would need to be met by fossil fuels rather than by renewables. And as a result, in a business as usual scenario, we will overshoot, we forecasted that we will overshoot the net zero target by 9 gigatons of CO2 emissions in 2050. That's just from appliances and equipment and lighting. And even if we succeeded, that's the red line. Oh, sorry. That's the red line shown here. And even if we succeeded in adopting the global benchmark levels by 2030, we'll still overshoot the net zero target by an estimated 7 gigatons in 2050. At the same time, billions of people do not own the appliances that they need to live healthy, productive lives. And many of the countries with the largest appliance access gaps are also most at risk to the dangers of climate change. Fortunately, a clear pathway to planet and people-friendly appliances exists. CLASP has identified the 10 appliances that should form the basis of an unprecedented efficiency push. We call these the net zero heroes. I have a short video to kind of liven things up today. It's just over a minute. Take it away. So we identified ambitious efficiency targets for each of these 10 appliance types. If these targets are met, we would only exceed the 82 exajoules renewable energy budget in 2050 by an estimated 21 exajoules instead of the 126 or 98 exajoules in the business as usual and global benchmark scenarios. We can eliminate the remaining 21 exajoules with behavior change and building efficiency improvements, other measures according to the IEA. Meeting CLASP's net zero hero targets, in summary, would avoid 9 gigatons of CO2 emissions in 2050 relative to business as usual. You can learn more in our Net Zero Heroes report, which can be viewed or downloaded from our website, clasp.ngo. You can use this QR code that's on the screen right now to get right to it. In addition to the 10 appliance-specific targets, we also made 11 other recommendations in our report directed at 4 different audiences. And today I want to draw your attention just to 3 of those recommendations for governments. First, we'll consider the need to rapidly strengthen appliance policies and to plan, track, and measure progress, and then we'll turn to the need for international collaboration, and specifically collaboration at the regional level, the subject of this panel. At COP28, global leaders, as we've been hearing repeatedly over the last 2 days, committed to doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. Countries must revise their NDCs by March of 2025 and will not have another opportunity to do so until 2030. At CLASP, we believe that in this NDC revision, countries must put their doubling efficiency commitments into action. Prioritizing appliances is a key part of that solution. So CLASP is creating an NDC toolkit to help governments develop appliance efficiency language for their NDCs. The toolkit will allow policymakers to easily gather data and understand the climate impacts of ambitious efficiency policies in their countries, providing the insights that they need to maximize CO2 mitigation. Our Net Zero Heroes report recommended international collaboration to prevent dumping of inefficient appliances. And to better understand the problem of dumping, CLASP collected data and published reports on the dumping of inefficient air conditioners. First in Africa in 2020, and then another report in 2023 looking at Southeast Asia. I'll show you just some of the findings from these 2 studies to help set the scene and motivate today's discussion about the importance of regional collaboration. So first, let's go to Africa in 2018. So CLASP looked at the efficiency of room air conditioners in 10 African markets. And we found that the sales-weighted average efficiency rating was just above 3 watts per watt, where the line is on this graph, the horizontal line. And this is lower than the minimum energy performance standards in effect in countries that export either parts for assembly or complete units into African countries at that time. And such exporting countries include China, South Korea, Japan, and the United States, as well as others. Then flash forward a few years, we did a similar study looking at the efficiency of room air conditioners in 7 Southeast Asian markets in 2021. Efficiency ratings ranged from a low of 3 to a high of 7.8 watts per watt. That's the combined seasonal performance factor, CSPF. The sales-weighted median efficiency rating was 4.2 watt-hours per watt-hour. That's shown by the lower of these 2 lines. And this is far below China's minimum standard at the time of 6.1 watt-hours per watt-hour. This is for the smallest capacity air conditioners. And that is also the target adopted by the ASEAN region for their maps by 2025. We also looked at room AC sales across Southeast Asia by producer. Sales of inefficient room ACs, those with efficiency ratings below that of China's MEPS, are shown in color on this graph, and they accounted for about 3/4 of total sales. Some of the remainder were efficient air conditioners, and some were unidentified. We couldn't determine where they had come from. Of the inefficient room ACs sold, roughly 2/3 were produced within the region. Those are shown in various colors of blue or green. And the other 1/3 were imported from outside the region, primarily from China. And it's important to note that whether assembled in the region or imported from outside the region, most were produced by Japanese, Chinese, and South Korean companies their subsidiaries or joint ventures with companies located in Southeast Asia. Only a small portion of the inefficient room ACs shown were, only a small portion were made solely by Southeast Asian companies. So this kind of sets the scene for our conversation today about the importance of regional collaboration and addressing this issue of appliance dumping. I'd like to welcome the panelists up onto the stage at this point. Excellent. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me up here. I'd like to start out with just a simple question. Introduce yourself. So hope you know who you are. And tell us how you're involved in promoting regional cooperation and preventing the dumping of inefficient appliances. You'll all have opportunities to speak more later. So just a very brief, like, what is your role and how does it relate to regional cooperation? So I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Ari. My name is Angela Wekongo. I work for CLASS. At CLASS, we've been directly involved in development of regional maps and for different regions. Myself, I've been directly involved in compliance training for the lighting standards for both East Africa community and the Southern Africa Development Community. Also, under CLASP, we, through the Clean Lighting Coalition, that helped countries, or a campaign that helped countries agree to phase out fluorescent lamps in the world, is that we are, through now the current strategies that we are supporting countries in complying to that ban. And one of the strategies is supporting ECOWAS in development of a regional standard, and I'll be directly involved in that.
Okay, so we've got Eastern Africa, West Africa,
yes,
Southern Africa, and a global campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nixon Bukachi. I work with the African Energy Commission. I know, being in Kenya, most of the people have known me for having been at the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, but I joined the commission just recently. Currently, I'm involved at the Commission in developing what we are calling the African Energy Efficiency Program, that is developing a strategy to help governments within the continent, the 55 governments, to transition in all aspects, so in all areas of the industry, that is the transport sector, the appliances, the agricultural sector, to transition towards more efficient more efficient practices and appliances with that in effect. So basically, before at the Commission, we have been able to do assessments for most of the regions in the continent. We did an assessment for the Southern region, that's the SADC region. We have done an assessment for the Eastern African region, the Northern Africa, Central Africa, and now we have a report that we are going to publish later this year, covering the entire continent, trying to assess what is the potential of energy efficient appliances within the continent. And maybe just to give a small pointer is, from the assessments that we have, initial assessment, is we expect that the demand for electricity, for instance, in Africa will be able to double by 2040, around 1.6 times what we are currently using. And from our assessments, if we are able to adopt efficient equipment and appliances within the continent, then we'll be able to reduce that by almost 50%. So that is from the assessment that we have already done. So basically showing the potential that we have in the continent to save more energy, and therefore working actively with the governments to be able to realize that potential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon. My name is Kofi Ejako. I work with the Energy Commission Ghana as the Director for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. My contribution to the regional cooperation when it comes to energy efficiency is an expansive one. There is an agency under ECOWAS called ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, ECRI for short. That agency is a regional body that has been given the mandate to try and harmonize standards in the ECOWAS member states. And since ECRI started that business way back 2010, I have been a regular feature on their platforms, trying to create the needed awareness among member states to try and align their development agenda with energy efficiency. I have also been involved in regional assessment of energy efficiency potential, all under the umbrella of ECRI. And my contribution has even gone beyond West Africa to East Africa, where United for Efficiency created a platform called Twinning, where energy officers and ozone officers are brought together to understand the business of energy efficiency so that the two can work hand in hand to promote energy efficiency. And I have traveled a lot around Rwanda and those East African enclaves, all in an effort to help speed up the energy efficiency campaign and agenda. Thank you.
Excellent. And I should also say that please don't limit yourselves to just regional collaboration. If there's continental collaboration and other experience that you want to bring to this conversation, please do.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karin Reisheim-Baller. I work for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization called UNIDO, based in Austria and Vienna. And I'm a program manager. And I'm in charge of a regional program which is implemented in the SADC region and also in the East African community, and is now going to be expanded to the ECOWAS region, targeting energy efficient appliances. I'm going to talk about it later on. And the second responsibility related to this, and I think sometimes a little bit missing in this discussion, is we are working, or I'm also in charge of a program that we are currently developing together with AFRIC, which is looking at local manufacturing of these technologies on the continent and how we can add value to some of the resources that are around.
Excellent. So I'd like to move now to a question for Karin. The ELA project is working to support the development of vibrant markets for energy efficient lighting and appliances across East Africa and Southern Africa, and has recently also expanded to West Africa. What key lessons have you learned from that work so far that you'd like to share with this group?
Yeah, thanks a lot. As mentioned, this project is covering now 36 countries, is 5 years under implementation, and has achieved quite some milestones. I would say we have adopted minimum energy performance standards harmonized by all the countries at the regional level for lighting, in collaboration with U4E, also for refrigerators and air conditioners. So we focused a lot on the regulatory aspects, and I think we really got good traction on the maps at regional level. We see countries get on board to adopt these regulations. But what we see is that the market itself is still at a very early stage. And the private sector has a very important role to play. So our project is focusing a lot on market development for the private sector, delivering services to large energy users, for example. We've all heard the words ESCOs as a potential, or super ESCOs. In our project, we have supported very concrete ESCO projects through its implementation, and we really see that there is a very high potential for business. And this is, I think, really overlooked for various reasons. I think that has been discussed largely. But I think we need to focus more on communicating that energy efficiency is a business. And the business is viable. Of course, the regulatory framework, etc., it is important to have and to trigger the investments. However, even in the current situation, it is a business. And I think we have ample experiences and cases that can demonstrate that energy service business models in particular, such as ESCOs or other business models, can really be demonstrated as a viable business in the regions. Secondly, I think one of the key lessons learned is that when we talk about the role of government, often we talk about government as setting the regulations, the policies, and of course this is very important, and also to be a role model is important as a government. But I think the government has a very instrumental power in the market for appliances, being the largest procurer of these products. So if the government changes procurement practices and makes energy efficiency mandatory in the procurement of appliances, and that goes all the way to building material, construction material, and so on and so forth. The power of the government, I think, in influencing the market uptake is essential, and this is where we want to put more and more effort. The third point I'd like to make about regional collaboration. The project that we are implementing is a regional program for various good reasons of creating a large market, of harmonized standards, using economies of scale, etc. But national implementation and enforcement is key. I think these two need to play hand in hand, and that's why we are also very happy that the Swedish government that is funding this regional project is now also coming, has now also agreed to fund the first national projects supporting this endeavor. We are starting with the first one in Kenya very soon. And the last point that I would like to emphasize as a lesson learned, I think, from the project is looking at the value chain approach of these products. Where are they coming from? Where are they used? Where are they produced? And how can we strengthen local value addition of energy efficient, of the energy efficient appliances market in sub-Saharan Africa? And here I see a very strong interlink between energy policies that have targets for energy efficiency and industrial policies. Because the industrial policy of most of the countries have targets for scaling up manufacturing in the region substantially, but this integrated policy development and enforcement needs to be strengthened and could really lead to a lot of local value addition. I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Kofi, I'd like to ask you a question. So on the topic of regional collaboration, there are a lot of good reasons for to collaborate regionally, but there's also a lot of barriers to doing so. Tell us about a time that a barrier to regional collaboration was successfully overcome.
You are right. Regional collaborations go through a lot of hurdles, but I think that the surmountability of the hurdle depends on where that region finds itself on the globe. It is a common knowledge that countries that are developing have a lot of collaboration and cooperation challenges. And the ECOWAS states have not been spared of some of those challenges. However, we have managed to sail through, and we have made some meaningful strides. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll just mention one of the hurdles that we were confronted with, and that basically had to do with the absence of a common strategy for development, arising out of differences in stages of development. In terms of development, we were not on the same level. So at a point when energy efficiency was a matter of priority to some member states, other states were dealing with bread and butter issues. They were battling diseases and poverty. So energy efficiency was never a priority. However, in view of our closeness and the porous nature of our borders, there was absolutely the need to make the needed collaboration a reality so that all together we could raise our fence. So around that time, ECOWAS gave ECRI the mandate to ensure a proper alignment of energy efficiency and state development. So ECOWAS, ECRI jumped in to play that needed collaborating role. And it is worthy of mention here that ECRI created a platform, and that platform was to create the needed awareness. And Ghana availed our resources to ECRI to be able to meet that mandate. What happened was that for all the platforms of awareness that was created, Ghana got in there to share success story, to awaken the can-do spirit among member states. So that is how we went around it, and by 2018, Nigeria had started implementation. But before that, let me backtrack a little and say that we were the only country that had MEPS in place. So we gave our MEPS to ECRI to make it a template for the region. So that was adopted, and member countries that did not have the capacity to develop MEPS as at that time found this a respite. So countries bought into it, and by 2018, Nigeria started enforcement. As we speak, Gambia has started enforcement, and they have even gone ahead to establish testing facility. It is anticipated that the test facility will be installed this year. It is common knowledge that for you to be able to implement MEPS, there is the need for you to have a reliable test facility. So in conjunction with MEPS, test facility are also coming in line to assist in enforcement of MEPS. So that is the journey that we traveled as ECOWAS community states to get to where we are now, where we now can boast of a harmonized standards. But in order not to disturb or thwart the efforts of countries like Ghana that has gone too far, we are approaching it in a stepwise direction, where one country, two countries at a time come online so that the needed resources could be put at their disposal to advance the campaign forward. Yeah.
So you've benefited from, the region has benefited from the leaders, the leading countries being willing to step forward and share their expertise and their capacity.
That is exactly so. And Ghana has opened our doors to all member states in the region and even outside the region who come to learn from us firsthand how we started it, what were the challenges, how we overcame the challenges, and where we are heading to in future. And I dare say that in every year we receive not less than 2 countries visiting. Some countries come twice in a year. Yeah, so that is how we have been going around the issue.
Wonderful. I want to pick up on something you said, Kofi, about testing and how it's widely known that you need to have testing capacity in order to enforce MEPS. Is it true that every country has to have testing capacity, or is it sufficient to have access to a neighbor's test lab, perhaps, for a given product? And I wonder, I'll open this up for the group, but I think, Nixon, you might have prepared a response for this, so I'll give you first dibs.
Thank you. I think, in my view, what countries need is access to the testing facilities. It's not each country to basically own their own testing facilities. I know my colleague from Ghana has already mentioned the good work that they've been able to do there, and said maybe the challenge that we have could be because of the different levels of development of the different countries. But in my view, one of the challenges that we face, especially in what we'd call the sub-Saharan Africa, is common challenges. If we are looking at the energy sector, we want to enhance access to our communities, we want to avail electricity to these people. So when we are doing our planning, you'd find that we do a bit of disintegrated planning. So in this case, we don't link the aspect of access to electricity to what it would come with in terms of efficiency, and also aspects to do with clean cooking. So if we're able to link this together, first at country level, then move it at the regional level, then we are able to plan in an integrated manner, so that even when a country like Ghana sets up a facility to be able to test air conditioners and refrigerators, as they have done, then Nigeria doesn't necessarily have to set up the same facility. They can focus on a different appliance. We could be talking about maybe they do something on microwaves or something else that is not in Ghana. But this one comes in many aspects. It also includes an aspect of us being able to move freely with goods from one country to another. For example, if the implementer in the Energy Commission in Ghana has impounded products and they feel they don't meet the standards, and they have to take them to a lab in Nigeria, and you have to go through all these customs protocols to be able to have those goods in that country, then it becomes practically impossible to be able to utilize facilities in different countries. So if I'm in the Eastern African region, basically, it means that if we have a testing lab for lights, like we have most of our initial developments in Kenya is to have labs for lighting, then Tanzania or Uganda don't have to do that. But then you have to make sure that there's that free movement of people, free movement of goods, to be able to move these products from one country to another, to be able to test, and also be able to share intelligence in terms of the results that we get after doing the tests. Because the results could be, for example, the product is not compliant, but this same product is being sold in another country. So it becomes very important that you're able to share the same intelligence with the countries in the same region, so that all of them are able to benefit both from the test facilities and also from the enforcement mechanisms that are being implemented in the various countries. Thank you.
Can you point to real-life examples of folks sharing either the testing capacity and or the intelligence, the results from those tests? And that's open.
Okay. I think that one side of the problem has been looked at, or the issue has been looked at. You need to turn the coin the other way around. Assuming transporting bulky equipment like air conditioners and refrigerating appliances from Nigeria to Ghana for testing. Who's gonna pay for the transportation cost? Mind you, in everything that you do as a regulator, you need to be mindful of trade facilitation, and you also need to be mindful of the impact of your activities on final prices on the market. So you may want to do things that will not end up making prices of goods on the market too expensive, beyond the reach of the ordinary person. I have heard this argument over and over again, but the practicality of it is that it is bound to be a difficult task to do. Besides, if you take West Africa, for instance, there is language problem that is there. There is a movement issue that is there. There is transportation issue that is there. And somebody imports appliances for sale. Mind you, if you want to test, you test per model. So if the person brings 10 models, it means that you are packing 10 pieces and transport for testing, which is a headache to the importer, because certainly the regulator is not going to pay for it. You will ask the importer to pay for it. And the importer, not being a Father Christmas, will add it onto the final cost on the market. So these things need to be looked at dispassionately when we are talking about testing facilities as a way of enforcing energy performance. Otherwise, we may end up creating something else to defeat the very purpose for which the MEPs were introduced. That is what I want to add.
So even just testing a handful of units, this is aftermarket, after the product has been introduced to the market for the purposes of surveilling the market. There are still barriers, cost barriers and otherwise, to moving the samples to the country where the test facility is located.
Maybe to just chip in, we may need to disintegrate the challenge because basically there is the challenge when the product is initially coming to the market. And just borrowing from what you were able to implement in Kenya when I was working with the regulator, we enforced a mechanism of testing at source. So in this case, it makes it easier for you to have the product coming to the market with already the labels or already having been confirmed to have met the requisite standards. But of course, as we always know in our market, not everyone will comply 100%. So in this case, if I have a product and I find a product in the market and I feel, or there's a feeling from the other players that the product that is in the market does not meet the standards, I don't think it will be right to say that the cost for carrying that product from Kenya, that one fridge. Of course, even now, fridges move from Uganda to Kenya, even without MEPs, and people are able to meet the cost. So moving that fridge from a shop in Kenya to a laboratory in Entebbe may not really be that expensive because this is a market enforcement mechanism. You are using surveillance. I know we benefit a lot, in quotes, because we are able to enforce easily now that these products are coming from outside. So we'll try to make sure that the products that are coming in initially have been tested and meet the requirements. Where we doubt, then you are able to carry that product across the region and have it retested in a different country. It might be a different scenario if you are talking about local manufacturing. It may be necessary if you are doing manufacturing like in South Africa for some of the products, then to have a local lab to be able to test. But for an import economy, I believe very strongly that it's possible to support the enforcement mechanism using regional labs. In the mechanism for implementing, in some of the regulations, if you go through, one of the things that comes out is if I get your product in the market and I confirm it doesn't meet the standards, then you pay the cost. If I retest the product, I find it meets the standards, then I absorb the cost. And that has been implemented even in countries like India, where manufacturers do challenge testing. So if I feel what you have declared in the market is not compliant, then I can take that product with the regulator and take it to a lab or someone whoever is enforcing the MEPS mechanism and confirm that that product either meets or doesn't meet. So if I make an allegation that is not true, then I'll meet the cost. But if we find that your product truly doesn't meet that standard, then you'll be able to meet that cost. And I think it has happened before, even for vehicles. There's a time there was a discussion in Europe about emission of vehicles, and people were able to take the Volkswagen model and have it tested and were able to share the report that, of course, it doesn't meet what the emission levels that were being declared at that time. So if I would want to put that very clearly, that if you are an import economy, the best mechanism would be start at source, but then you can be able to benefit in terms of enforcement, because also setting up the labs, and maybe you can be able to get a breakdown from countries like like Ghana. It takes a lot of money to set up the lab, to have the lab certified, to build the capacity, and it will drag us even longer if you'd want every country to adopt that for us to be able to push this discussion forward. Thank you.
I want to move to standards harmonization, but before I do so, I just wanted to see if there were any other comments on testing and sharing testing capacity. Karin?
To build on what has been said from the lessons that we have from our regional program. When we started what we call the ELA project, I think you've heard this several times, it follows actually the model that Kofi has introduced for West Africa. The model follows also working like what in West Africa is ECRI. We are working in East Africa through the East African Center, and in the SADC region through the SADC Center. So I think that model is a very relevant one. But when we started in the project, we came 2 days earlier, and we went into the shops and picked all kinds of samples. And our Swedish partners from the Swedish Energy Agency, who have a lab in Stockholm, they sent it by express to Stockholm. So by the time, a few days later, when we had the launch of the event, we showed basically what is written on the box and what reflects the reality of the performance. And in 90%, it was very far apart. So I think trust is good, and I fully understand where you're coming from. But there is a reason, I think, why countries are really insisting of having a testing or a verification capacity, at least, to do market surveillance, to understand what is around in the market. There are some low-cost options. For example, in our regional project, we provided every country with a mobile test suitcase, so to say, where they can go into the street vendor or into any of the malls, pick any light bulb and test it instantly to verify does it comply or not. It will not hold if you go to court by using just this mobile test lab. But I'm saying I think it's very essential to understand the market, to have a market surveillance instrument as a country. And what we are doing is we are supporting the establishment of reference labs, call them regional reference labs. The first one we are equipping, so to say, and capacitating in Uganda, the second one in Mozambique, and we will continue as you go. And I think to recognize what has been done in another country for a product, that you can trust that what has been tested in Uganda or in Kenya is also acceptable and doesn't need to be retested in Tanzania. So that saves a lot of money. We can really work together on a regional compliance framework that is efficiency, benefits, trade of these products, etc. So I think that is quite essential to have this mutual recognition of the testing.
Excellent, thank you. So on standards harmonization, I'd like you to start off, Angela. I know that the ELA project has supported the development of regional lighting maps and a regional compliance framework across the EAC and the SADC. What have been the challenges of transposing the regional standards, and adopting them at the member state level, and how can these challenges be addressed?
Yeah, Ari, thank you so much for that question. As I was introducing myself, I mentioned that I was directly involved in compliance training for these lighting standards, both at the ESC and the SADC level. And what this really involved was sitting down with each different countries, taking them through the compliance framework that Kirin has mentioned, and then trying to identify the problems that they are going through. So one of the top challenge that most countries mentioned was insufficient resources, and this is in terms of financing. So as you understand market surveillance, you at least need to have a budget for you to do like market surveillance, and and even there's there's resources that you need, even in terms of having people or staffs that will be doing this work. And most of them mentioned a challenge of resources. So my immediate solution for this is that probably countries need to probably allocate funding from government to trickle down to like these regulators or other agencies at the beginning of the program, and then they slowly transition to more sustainable options, such as levies, product registration fees, and all that. And then another challenge that we noted is legal framework. So you find some cases where countries do not have like clear mandates for different agencies, and even for the ones that have mandates, they are like struggling, or they don't have enough powers to conduct market surveillance. And then we have cases where the countries have both, but then you find probably they have not updated their regulation, and so this lighting standard does not sit on their regulation, and therefore they're not able to implement this standard. So for example, a regulator. And then another challenge that we identified was insufficient testing, especially for verification testing. I don't want to dwell so much on that, but I think that was also a common challenge that we identified through the different countries that we were talking through. And then another challenge was smuggling and porous borders. And so different countries complained that the products are coming in different places where it's not necessarily the customs, and therefore they're not able to track these products coming into the market. And I think the immediate solution, I think it speaks to the regional harmonization, the need for you to do the regional harmonization, the need for you to have like common facilities such as testing facilities, product registration systems, so that you're able to share market intelligence amongst each other, and you're able to monitor the different models that are coming in the market. And also so that, for example, if a regulator in Uganda finds that a certain model is not compliant, they're able to spell it out in a product registration system, for example, so that then maybe another regulator in Kenya, for example, they can easily identify that model, and they can be on the lookout in their markets. Mm-hmm. So the challenges are many, but I think I'll speak mostly to those four.
Yeah. Isn't it the case that in at least one of the regions in Africa, once a standard is adopted at the regional level, it's mandatory for the member states to then adopt it as into their national regulations? But that doesn't mean that it gets actually effectively implemented.
Exactly.
It's just on paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, maybe we should talk about product dumping, since that's, I know, an important issue. I guess first we should just say, for the benefit of the audience, what product dumping is, and then how can cooperating with your neighbors help to prevent dumping? And Kofi, I'd like to give you a chance to start out on that one, because I know you've been quite active.
Thank you
anti-dumping.
Yeah. Product dumping occurs when products that are of substandard, that contain obsolete, that are produced out of obsolete technology, that contain obsolete refrigerants are dumped on another country by a different country whose citizens would not want to buy those products. That is dumping. And dumping is real. It is not a figment of anybody's imagination. I'm happy to see the slides you presented by way of curtain raiser. Even if you had not done that, I was going to quote from that report because I've studied that report very well. That clasp study indicates, reveals that indeed dumping is real. And last year, during the MOP, which happened on this very soil, there was an energy efficiency seminar by way of precursor to the meeting of parties of the Montreal Protocol. And during that energy efficiency seminar, TEEP, that is Technology and Economic Assessment Panel of the Montreal Protocol, presented a report. And in that report, they also quoted IEA's report that indicated that Article 5 countries were saturated with dumped products. Having set that stage, it is very important that it becomes a global concern to eradicate dumping, because dumping is one of the major cankers that militate against the uptake of super efficient appliances, because it provides cheaper alternatives. And when the ordinary person is on the shopping floor, he doesn't think of the environment. He doesn't think of the climate. He thinks of his wallet. So the rational decision is to buy a cheap product, which may be a substandard one. So it is important that we tackle the issue of dumping very, very dispassionately, be you a producing country or a consuming, importing country. I think it is important that we look at it as a shared responsibility and eradicate it. Now, coming specifically to your question, how do we join hands as regional states to prevent dumping? I think that the bigger, the stronger. In this fight against dumping, I'm not sure one country can play an island in a community of countries where all the surrounding countries do not have MEPs, or even if they have MEPs, they don't have any robust enforcement mechanisms in place, which makes their jurisdiction attractive to bad products. So if you find yourself within that enclave, definitely, because of the porous nature of our borders in West Africa, and for that matter, Africa, these substandard appliances are bound to enter your jurisdiction. Let me explain it with this analogy. Let's say that you are infested with pests, and you spend all resources at your disposal to kill the pests in your compound, but your neighbor doesn't do anything. I can assure you the next day, the pest will be migrated onto your compound again. So the best thing to do is that you join hands, and with that concerted effort, then you get rid of the common enemy. So going by that analogy, that is the more reason why Ghana has been a major supporter of the ECOWAS harmonization agenda, so that we get all the countries in the region ready to raise our fences against dumping of these appliances. Because if you take Ghana as a case in point, to the west is Cote d'Ivoire, north is Burkina Faso, east is Togo. And if all these countries don't have MEPS and enforce any enforced mechanism there, what is going to happen is that these dumped products will be berthed at their ports, and they will enter by road, which is so easy and so common. So it stands to reason that to be able to fight against dumping, we need to first tackle it from the national level. We need to have our MEPS robust enforcement. Then we expand it to regional level, like ECRI, SACRI, IACRI. Then eventually we have a continental kind of program in place where the entire African continent has a very high fence that makes it very difficult for these undeserved products to come in. I call them the zombie appliances. And they are a kind of imported poverty. If you claim that Africa is a poor continent inhabited by poor people, why then do you bring these things to Africa whose running cost is hell? And then it drinks electricity. It doesn't consume, it drinks electricity. So the running cost, the cost of spare parts, and then the electricity consumption becomes a burden on the consumer. Monies that could have remained in the pocket to help afford quality health care, take the girl child to school, everything is spent on electricity. You understand? So I want to believe that dumping is a kind of obnoxious trading practice that needs to be confronted head-on because it is injustice. One of the worst injustice that can be visited on a citizen of this globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. I'd like, looking at the clock, I think we should move to closing comments. And I have maybe a little bit unusual question I'd like to pose to each of the panelists in turn. I'll start with you, Angela. So what's one thing that you know now about appliance energy efficiency that you wish you knew 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago when you got started in appliance energy efficiency? And what would you have done differently if you had known that then?
Thank you so much for that question. So at CLASP, I've had the privilege of working with different governments in development of policies. And one thing that I've really reflected back is stakeholder engagement. I think I like what Fenwick's really talked when he was presenting, that stakeholder engagement is such a vital process for any policy development, and if even you want successful implementation of this policy. So I think it's very important that we bring different stakeholders at start, and we make sure that we intelligently also do that so that every stakeholder is covered. And yeah, so reflecting back, I think I just want to give an example is that we have a program in South Africa, so where we have supported the government of South Africa in development of many policy standards for different appliances. And we had a very interesting one when we were doing a policy for motors. So we did a market assessment, collected data, involved different stakeholders at different stages, including consultation. But then also our MEPS was quite ambitious because we had proposed at IE3, which was approved. But then once we had almost finished everything and the draft was finally going to the department that finally approves it, another importer came in and he wrote a very detailed explanation why he thinks motor at IE3 will be so aggressive for the country. And all of a sudden, all the other manufacturers who had actually been involved in our consultations, in our everything, even in giving us data, they started agreeing with that analogy. And they just went ahead and made a stop to everything that we had done. So we quickly had to come back on the drawing board, find out ways in which we can, bring about this analogy. And also, so what we did is that we brought different experts from different countries who have also adopted MEPS at IE3. We sat with these manufacturers, with these suppliers. We made sure that their voices were heard, but also we gave them a strong evidence why they needed these MEPS at this level. And with that was finally approved, which that standard was actually, it's at the final stages of approval in South Africa. So it will be one of the countries that will be having a very aggressive policy for motors in Africa, and that's a good thing. But I think it really draws back to the importance of stakeholder engagement at every point, and also intelligently doing that.
So if you'd recognized the importance, maybe you would have made sure that
exactly.
that manufacturer was included from the beginning.
Yeah, because we had kind of targeted very big manufacturers, and his argument was that he's a small manufacturer, and therefore he's a small supplier, and therefore this standard is going to impactly affect him importing into the country, given his level of importation in the country. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, from my end, I think looking back, one of the things that we should not ignore is the power of the government and the government buying in some of these policies. If we look at it and use an example of when we had COVID in Kenya and the enforcement of use of masks, it was not a matter of whether you want to, but a matter of you should. It's a rule that you should be able to use a mask so that you're able to protect your neighbor. So in most of the policies, one of the things I've seen that comes out as a challenge at the end of the day is the technocrats can talk, we can get support from funders, we can get support from the private sector, but if there is no that strong government will or political buy-in to implement some of these policies, then it's next to impossible for you to be able to move forward. And in this case, I would give a case study of what we were doing in Kenya when we were implementing MEPS initially. And I remember immediately we put that standard and started blocking goods at the port. People had access to the president at that time. It was not this government, it was the previous government. So people had access to the president. They had access to the Minister of Industrialization. We had, I remember, the president of Samsung. It's the first time we met. At that position, I was a very junior officer. But they came here lobbying so that we are not able to implement the MEPS at that time. But the good thing is the train had left the station. There was support from the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization. There was support from the presidents, and we were able to enforce those MEPS. But then in this case, if you start a policy, and also it trickles down to the regional level, I strongly believe it's possible to harmonize MEPS at the regional level, provided there's political will from the ministers for the respective dockets, and there's collaboration between the different government agencies that are involved in the value chain. So the standards body, the people enforcing the MEPS, all in the different ministries have a buy-in. So in my opinion, we should not underestimate that. Because in most cases, and we have examples in Kenya, examples in the region, and in many countries, you develop the MEPS, you adopt the MEPS, and the MEPS is not enforced. But if the government is willing, then it's possible. And for us to make it, to make the government people willing, in this case, we have to show the value of what we are doing. And I think the discussion that you're having now on being able to double our efficiency as member states or as all countries is important, because once we blow the whistle many times, blow this message many times to our ministers, then they will be able to see the value. For example, if you draw statistics from what we have from most African countries, and you're looking at even the transmission and distribution efficiency, where we are talking about 20 to 40%, it's immoral for you to say the people do not have access to a country, access to electricity in a given country, and the utility is losing 40%. So you should be able to show that value to the politicians so that they're able to take it up and at the end of the day support you in pushing their agenda. So whether you have very strong private sector, it will not work unless there is support from government in terms of being able to take up the policy, run with it, and support the implementing agencies to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. In my case, it is a regret. In 2008, a law was passed prohibiting the importation of used cooling appliances to Ghana. I think I downplayed the importance of stakeholder engagement. There was a serious pushback from the people who were engaged in that trade. But I felt that I had the law behind me, so they could go to hell. The law was passed in 2008, and it gave 2-year moratorium. So implementation was supposed to start from 2010. We got to 2010, and they said that, no way, you did not tell us anything, we did not know anything, so we are not prepared. And for that matter, you cannot enforce this law. They fought very hard. It got to the political level, and we were forced to give additional 2-year moratorium. And giving 4-year moratorium for a law banning the importation of these Euro carcasses was very costly. Looking at the amount of used fridges and air conditioners that came into Ghana within that 4 years, it was even more than what came in during the previous 10 years. So I learned a very bitter lesson from that. And moving forward, we have never played with stakeholder consultation. And that is maybe one of the takeaways I will give to our audience. Those who are serious to implement energy efficiency, you need to take your stakeholders very, very seriously. Basically, you have 3 important stakeholders: the government, the business community, and the consumers. Once you get these 3 stakeholders on board, you get their buy-in, then you are good to take off the ground. Otherwise, you taxi for 20 years, you will not be able to take off. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe just one thing to build on what Kofi said from what we have learned, because the project is now 5 years and the implementation. I think what we have learned is developing maps is very fast, so that's not an obstacle. But the process to adopt them, also the adoption is fast, but the process to get the buy-in, also at regional level, is very critical. It took us, I think, 1.5 years, while the document you can have ready almost within a week, right? But the whole process to get all the countries on board, from the 21 countries that we are working with, going back, consulting with their stakeholders, coming back, reporting back on the comments. So this whole process, and there are established procedures in all of the regions. I think that's very, very good. But that process we probably underestimated a bit in terms of time, cost, consuming factors, because it's really coming together, sharing, bringing in comments, going home, consulting with your stakeholders and so on. So that we underestimated a bit, I would say. And the second thing, building on this, is when we started, like way back with the first regional maps process in the ECOWAS region, for example, we did not, or we thought, once it's adopted at regional level, it will trigger change, right? I think about 10 years after this first lighting, it was at that time MAPS, was adopted, ECRI conducted a study of what have the member states effectively done based on that success of regional adoption. And it was rather moderate. So when we design now the new phase of our regional project, we are building in a very strong component to help the countries with the national implementation and enforcement upon request. So it creates a bit of positive competition as well. Those that are ready and willing to move, they get support, and others are very welcome to follow. So I think those are some of the lessons learned.
Great. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, all of you. This was extremely enlightening, and I enjoyed very much moderating this panel. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Yeah. I guess we get off the stage.
So I'd just like to make some extremely brief closing remarks. Thank everybody for their inputs, and just point out that this is worth the pain. The countries where these programs have existed for the last 20, 30 years are saving 15, 20% of their electricity these days. That's the case for Europe, and they're expecting it to be 25% by 2030. So they carry on giving, so it's worth the effort that goes into them. But I think, you know, there are several points about stakeholder engagement in that last segment, and the most successful programs we see are those that are partnerships. People worry that they're going to be too slow, but they're so much more effective that you regain the time generally that you lost. And I think we've all learnt that over the last 30 years of trying to implement these programs. So yes, we can work together. Yes, we should have challenging standards. We should have information and incentives to support those and to support market transformation. It can be done without increasing cost, but we need to have the right data analysis available, and we need to be able to convince our stakeholders. And going back to the case study approach, showing that it's been done, that it works, that stakeholders actually didn't suffer, that factories didn't close down, showing that this has worked around the world is a very important process that we need to go through, and CLASP do a lot of this, we do some of it. There are others, many others around the world who are doing this sort of work, but we do need to club together and make sure that we convince governments of the benefits, be they social, be they economic, and so that they do continue to support these programs. But with that, I just say thank you very much, and this is the last event of the last day of the conference. So thank you again for all your time and your attention, and safe journey home. Bye bye.